What if the very substance you've been trained to fear, sugar, wasn't always the enemy? What if in a very specific form it could actually help unlock fat loss and improve insulin sensitivity? I know how contradictory that sounds, but 1 tablespoon of a particular syrup is quietly challenging decades of assumptions about blood sugar regulation. This isn't a viral trend or influencer hype. It's human research that's existed for years, largely ignored. Today, I'm going to explain how this overlooked metabolic tool may help reduce insulin spikes, calm cravings, and finally address stubborn abdominal fat that seems resistant to everything else you've tried. Let's start with the paradox. Most people are afraid of sugar, and honestly, the data justifies that fear. Excess sugar consumption is clearly linked to obesity, diabetes, and metabolic disease. But what if one specific form of sugar actually helps your body process carbohydrates more efficiently instead of overwhelming it? I'm talking about molasses, specifically one type. In a 2016 human study, participants ate the same breakfast with identical calories and carbohydrates. The only difference was the inclusion of a specialized molasses-derived compound. The result? Significantly lower blood glucose and insulin responses. Same food, same calories, very different metabolic outcome. Insulin resistance is the real crisis of modern health. It's the slow, silent process that leads to belly fat, visceral fat around organs, fatigue, brain fog, fatty liver, and cardiovascular disease. When I first saw data suggesting molasses could reduce glucose and insulin spikes, I was skeptical. Sugar is sugar, right? That's what we've been told. But skepticism demands investigation, and when I examined the human trials and lab data, the pattern was consistent. Polyphenol-rich sugarcane molasses extracts lowered post-meal glucose and insulin. These compounds slowed carbohydrate digestion and reduced oxidative stress at the cellular level. To understand why this matters, you need to understand insulin resistance itself. Think of your cells as having locks on their surface, insulin receptors. Insulin is the key that opens those locks so glucose can move from your bloodstream into cells. In healthy metabolism, insulin rises, glucose enters cells, and blood sugar returns to baseline. In insulin resistance, those locks stop responding properly. The body compensates by producing more insulin, keeping insulin levels chronically high. This drives fat storage, especially in the abdomen, creates fatigue because glucose can't enter cells efficiently, and fuels inflammation. Here's the dangerous part. You can be insulin resistant for years while your fasting glucose and A1C still appear normal. Meanwhile, insulin levels are climbing silently. That's why the real goal isn't just lowering glucose, it's reducing the total insulin exposure after meals. And that's where this unusual idea comes in. Can a specific form of sugar actually blunt the glucose spike from a meal? Under specific conditions, the answer appears to be yes. Molasses is what remains after sugarcane juice is boiled and sugar crystals are removed. With each boiling, more sucrose is extracted, leaving behind a darker, more concentrated syrup. The final product, blackstrap molasses, is rich in minerals and polyphenols and contains less sugar per tablespoon than many sweeteners. It's especially high in magnesium, potassium, calcium, iron, and antioxidant plant compounds. Its glycemic index is lower than table sugar, and more importantly, its bioactive compounds change how carbohydrates are digested and absorbed. Human studies support this. In the European Journal of Nutrition, researchers showed that adding a molasses-derived concentrate to a meal reduced post-meal glucose and insulin significantly. Another study incorporated similar extracts into bread and cereal products and observed 5 to 20% lower glycemic responses. These aren't theories, they're measured blood glucose curves. The proposed explanation isn't magic, it's biochemistry. Polyphenols inhibit enzymes like alpha amylase and alpha glucosidase, slowing the breakdown of carbohydrates into glucose. Instead of a flood, glucose enters the bloodstream gradually. There's also the oxidative stress angle. Insulin resistance is driven in part by inflammation and oxidative damage that interferes with insulin receptor signaling. Molasses contains phenolic acids and flavonoids that help reduce oxidative stress, allowing insulin receptors to function more normally. And magnesium plays a critical role in insulin signaling. Deficiency is strongly linked to insulin resistance. Blackstrap molasses happens to be one of the most magnesium-rich sweeteners available. Now let's be very clear about expectations. There is no evidence that 1 tablespoon of molasses cures insulin resistance or melts belly fat on its own. Most studies examine short-term glucose responses, often in healthy individuals. This is not a miracle cure. It's a metabolic tool. Used correctly, it may reduce pancreatic stress, lower average insulin exposure, and create a more favorable environment for fat loss, especially visceral fat. Used incorrectly, it does nothing. This only works in the right context. If your diet is still dominated by ultra-processed foods, refined seed oils, constant snacking, and liquid sugars, molasses won't help you. But if you've cleaned up your nutrition, practiced time-restricted eating, and move daily, then choosing a sweetener that slows carbohydrate absorption instead of accelerating it can matter. Another highly effective drink uses apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar is one of the most researched metabolic compounds available. Human studies show it improves insulin sensitivity, reduces post-meal glucose spikes, lowers fasting glucose and HbA1c, reduces triglycerides, and improves satiety. Lower insulin levels mean less inflammation, less visceral fat storage, and slower plaque development. To prepare it, mix 1 to 2 tablespoons of raw apple cider vinegar with the mother into 8 ounces of water. Add half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon and a squeeze of lemon if desired. Drink this before your highest carbohydrate meal of the day to blunt glucose and insulin spikes and protect arterial health. The final drink is a turmeric-based golden latte. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, is one of the most powerful anti-inflammatory nutrients ever studied. Multiple randomized controlled trials show that curcumin reduces CRP, IL-6, oxidized LDL, and inflammation-driven visceral fat. It supports arterial calmness, improves endothelial function, and promotes overall cardiovascular resilience. To prepare it, warm 10 ounces of unsweetened coconut milk and add half a teaspoon of turmeric, a pinch of black pepper to enhance absorption, half a teaspoon of ginger, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1 tablespoon of grass-fed butter or ghee. Blend and drink it in the evening as a calming, restorative beverage that supports recovery and hormonal balance. You don't need to consume all of these drinks in one day. That's unnecessary and excessive. Choose 1 per day or rotate them weekly. Consistency matters more than quantity. After about 30 days, track markers such as APOB, CRP, fasting insulin, A1C, triglycerides, HDL, and even a CAC score if available. Most people not only see improvements on paper, they feel them in energy, mental clarity, blood pressure, and digestion.